Welcome to the Daily Report for June 6, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. 80 years ago, young Allied soldiers ran through the surf towards machine gun nests to secure freedom for people they'd never met living in countries they'd never visited, and which 4,000 of them on that day would never live to see. We'll tell their story and report on President Biden's day honoring that sacrifice. Hitler started by invading Poland, which sits on the border of Ukraine, the victim in Europe's current invasion. We'll get a neighbor's perspective from a general in the Polish army. Plus, what's a surprise tornado? There was one in Michigan. From Texas, we'll have a local read on the new federal border policy. And from the Middle East, an update on the snarl in the global shipping supply chain. And the Starliner has made it to its parking space in outer space. The Daily Report starts in a moment.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means...
Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Paris. Ed, the president made no mistake about where this speech was headed, but it was aimed at the ally who's not there, Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, John, in what was a really incredible use of an otherwise solemn ceremony, the president struck back at, as you said, Russia, who was not officially invited by the French government to attend this year's anniversary, and used his remarks to draw comparisons between what happened 80 years ago this week and what's happening at the other end of Europe right now, calling Russia a tyrant and a bully. And among those despots around the world, Vladimir Putin is, who's trying to blow away borders without the consent of the people within them. A pretty stark international political speech delivered to on the world stage to the world, and trying to unite Europe behind the cause that the United States has led over the last 2 years, roughly, as the war in Ukraine continues. That Volodymyr Zelensky is here in France for these commemorations, meeting with his counterparts from the United States tomorrow, from France, from Canada and other countries, is designed to reinforce the support at least the Western world has for him, and show Russia again how united Europe is. But this has traditionally been something that American commanders-in-chief use to pay tribute, to speak in a more unified way about the common cause. But instead today, it was used to draw a really sharp contrast with Russia.
Tomorrow, the president will speak at Pontohak Ranger Station. Remind us why that location is significant, and what do you expect from him there?
It was what the 2nd Army Rangers had done to climb those cliffs about 100 feet to neutralize and end attacks from German artillery. That has been memorialized by commanders-in-chief in the past, most notably Ronald Reagan, who spoke in 1984 about the boys of Pontohak. President Biden is planning on seizing on similar themes that Reagan touched on in his 1984 speech, concerns about the future of democracy. And the White House has said that while today's remarks were obviously designed to reach France and Europe and the world, tomorrow's is more directed at Americans themselves. And the concerns that the president has about what's going on with democracy in the United States, or what could transpire after the elections this November. So while we don't expect him to explicitly call out his anticipated opponent, Donald Trump, it'll be unmistakable to the ear who or what he's inferring when he raises concerns about the risks. The fact that his likely opponent is someone who, of course, is now a convicted felon, has said and done things detrimental to democratic norms, lowercase democratic norms. And it should be quite a contrast, again, using the world stage to try to score domestic political points, or at least make some domestic political points.
Back on that notion, back on the world stage, the president will hold talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. And throughout the conflict, the invasion in Ukraine, we've seen where European leaders will say something and the White House or the president will say, no, we're not going to go that far. And then ultimately they get there. The most recent decision to attack positions inside of Russia would be an example. In that context, then, Macron has talked about the fact that NATO soldiers may or NATO troops may sometime be involved in what's happening in Ukraine. Do you think that'll be what they'll talk about? And if not, what will they talk about when they meet tomorrow?
So not only the possibility that NATO troops would potentially be engaged, but more specifically, Macron has left open the door to just sending French troops on his own, unilaterally and outside the alliance. We spoke with the French ambassador to the United States in recent days who said, yes, that's not something we're willing to rule out quite yet. We will make that decision if we have to. So that'll be one subject of conversation. General agreement the two leaders have on Gaza and Israel and how that war should be concluded. But France is a major benefactor and supporter of the International Criminal Court, which is seeking the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leaders of Hamas. France's argument is you can try to use that court for some things, but if you're going to do it for some things, you've got to do it for all, because the United States has called on the ICC to potentially help prosecute Putin and other Russians for war crimes in the Ukraine. Beyond that, they've got common concern about China, but are approaching that situation differently, and shared concerns and experiences with climate change, although the French and many other countries would be worried about whether or not the United States will remain committed to global climate change agreements should the Biden administration end next year. So lots to discuss with America's oldest ally in meetings that are set to formally be held Saturday and Sunday.
Ed O'Keefe in Paris. Thank you so much, Ed. As we remember those who risked and gave their lives 80 years ago, I'll speak with author Garrett Graff about his new book, When the Sea Came Alive, an oral history of D-Day. That's coming up later this hour. More than 30 people were killed Thursday in an Israeli airstrike on a Gaza school housing displaced Palestinians. The Israeli military says the strike was targeting Hamas militants. Israel says the group was operating at the school and planning attacks. It did not give any evidence of these claims. The strike came as U.S., Qatari, and Egyptian mediators resumed talks for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. President Biden last month proposed a three-phase plan that includes a permanent end to the war. And back at home, police arrested 13 people in California Wednesday after a group of pro-Palestinian protesters barricaded themselves inside the offices of Stanford University's president and provost. The demonstration was part of the larger trend of college campus protests over the war in Gaza that we've seen over the last few months, with students demanding their schools sever ties with Israel and divest from companies that do business with it. Stanford said students who were part of the protest would be suspended and any seniors would not be allowed to graduate. The man accused in the murders of 4 women on Long Island has been charged with 2 additional killings. Rex Heuermann was arraigned Thursday for the murders of Sandra Castilla in 1993 and Jessica Taylor in 2003. The 60-year-old was arrested and charged last year in previous killings along Gilgo Beach. On Thursday, the Suffolk County District Attorney referred to a document he says was used as a blueprint for the crimes.
His motivations, meticulous planning, and clear intent is obvious. His intent was nothing short but to murder these victims.
Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. A trial date has yet to be set. In the federal gun trial of the president's son, Hunter Biden, the jury heard testimony Thursday from his ex-girlfriend, who is also the widow of his brother, Beau. Haley Biden was asked about her and Hunter's drug use in 2018. She testified that it was through Hunter that she also came to be using crack cocaine. That is the time period, prosecutors allege, during which the president's son lied about his addiction on a form to buy a gun. He's charged with 3 felonies in connection with the purchase and has pleaded not guilty. Haley Biden also testified about discovering the gun at the center of the case in Hunter's car. Texts shown at trial also appear to show Hunter telling Haley he purchased and used crack cocaine 2 days after filling out the form to buy the gun. In an interview Thursday, President Biden said he would not pardon his son if he was found guilty. If convicted on all 3 accounts, Hunter could face a maximum of 25 years in prison. Trump ally Steve Bannon has been ordered to report to prison by July 1st. Bannon was convicted of contempt of Congress in 2022 for not cooperating with the House January 6th committee. The former Trump advisor said he did not comply with a subpoena because he had what he asserted was executive privilege. Bannon's 4-month prison sentence was delayed as he appealed the conviction. However, he was not successful. Several of his challenges were rejected last month. On Thursday, a judge ruled to lift the hold on his sentence as he continues the appeals process. Wednesday marked the first day of deportations under President Biden's latest executive order on immigration. The order turns away migrants seeking asylum at the southern border who crossed illegally. That policy will be in place until the weekly average of daily illegal border crossings falls below 1,500. And even if that happens, it would be reinstated if the average goes back up to 2,500. But there was no dramatic change in migrant crossings on the order's first day. In effect, Border Patrol recorded 4,000 migrant apprehensions between ports of entry on Wednesday. That's slightly higher than the May average of 3,800 per day. For more on this, we're joined by John Moritz. He is the chief politics reporter for the Austin American-Statesman. John, thank you for joining us. So what's the reaction been from leaders in Texas about this executive order?
Interestingly, both Democrats and Republicans seem to have problems with it on the whole. There are some exceptions on the Democratic side. But Governor Abbott, as we might expect, calls it a sham, a smokescreen, all kinds of things. Should have happened a long time ago. And even if it had happened a long time ago, this wouldn't have been the way to address the problem. If you're Democrats, it's like, why are you punishing legitimate asylum seekers? They're here coming to America like many people did through the generations of our country. And why now? And so it's kind of put the president in sort of a no-win situation in Texas.
And what about regular folks? I mean, they got busy lives. Maybe it's not even registering, but it's such an issue in Texas. How's it being received in the public?
It's not being ignored. As expected, immigration is probably the biggest concern among Texas voters this election cycle. Interestingly enough, the Hispanic community, if we could even attempt to make it monolithic, is sort of split on it. Your rural Hispanic people who live in South Texas are a little bit more supportive of aggressive enforcement, more liberal and especially more younger Hispanics living in the urban and suburban parts of the state. They're the ones who are pushing back on Biden's executive order, and that's being reflected in the Democratic Congress people from those regions who have weighed in.
So that's a super important insight into that split, because Texas Representative Sylvia Garcia said the order would be detrimental to the Biden campaign standing with Hispanic voters. A, do you think that's right? And B, should we always keep in mind when we hear things like that to understand that split that you just articulated so well?
Yes, the Republican Party in Texas makes no secret that it wants to make some serious inroads into South Texas and even into the urban pockets among Hispanics. It's their argument, and I was just talking with the party chairman yesterday, that many of these folks are more conservative in their outlook. Perhaps even from Catholic upbringing, making them, less comfortable with the national liberal Democratic base. And so, yes, there is some concern that Biden could see his share of the Hispanic vote in Texas drop from what it was 4 years ago.
And what final question, John, is about the governor. He has played at the national level on this issue. Obviously, it's important for him, but with the busing and being outspoken on it, what do you expect from the governor other than criticism? Is he planning anything else in response to this?
Interestingly enough, the day after, or maybe 2 days after the president issued his order, the governor here announced that he was starting a 10 most wanted list for immigrants who are here without authorization. So if the president puts in $1 worth of chips, Biden puts in $2.50 to $3 worth of chips on his side of the table.
John Moritz with the Austin American Statesman. Thanks a lot, John.
Always a pleasure.
As world leaders gather in France to mark 80 years since D-Day, Western allies vow support for Ukraine. But is the promise of weapons and approval to use them to strike inside Russia too little too late? Coming up, I'll speak with a 4-star Polish general about Russia's war and the global implications of failing to support Ukraine. Plus, how Houthi rebel attacks in the Red Sea are disrupting the global supply chain and how it's affecting Americans. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
A surge of attacks from Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels on ships traveling through the Red Sea continues to disrupt the global supply chain. Since November, Houthi rebels have launched more than 50 attacks on international shipping lanes in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden in response to Israel's war with Hamas. The U.S. and other countries are defending the area, but the attacks have not stopped. U.S. officials say those attacks and the threat of them are driving U.S. prices and causing delivery delays for critical humanitarian items such as food and medicine in places where it's needed most. CBS News reporter Zach Hudak has been looking into this for me. Sorry, Zach. Let's start with how these attacks are affecting the global supply chain.
John, 30% of the global container trade goes through the Red Sea and then through the Suez Canal. You have to get through the Red Sea to get to the Suez Canal. And since the 19th century, the Suez Canal has been basically a shortcut to get from Asia over to Europe and to North America without having to loop the entire way south around Africa. The result of these attacks is that we're seeing a 50% decline in the traffic of these ships going through the Red Sea, going through the Suez Canal, and instead looping the entire way around the Cape of Good Hope and then the whole way back up north to Europe or up north and across the ocean to North America.
And so how is this affecting just regular old Americans?
Well, the most direct result is it costs more to do these shipments. These shipping companies are paying more in wages because the journey takes 2 to 4 weeks longer, paying much more in fuel because it's about 4,500 nautical miles longer than it would be otherwise. And those costs are passed on to consumers when they go and buy goods. What's most remarkable here, though, is that these drones being used are not the ultra-advanced Reaper drones we hear about the U.S. military conducting these complex strikes with.
And these are the drones being used by the Houthis against these ships with the big U.S. military there, picking them off. You know, they're causing mayhem with these drones you're talking about.
And they're using them basically as suicide drones. They are like the modern-day suicide bomber, just there's no pilot who has to die. They're just flying them into these ships. So it's, in some ways, a primitive operation. But the result is that they are deterring these ships from going through this sea. And as a result, they are effectively imposing economic sanctions on European countries, on the United States. And they are not even an official government, and they are managing to do this.
So and your point is that even if they're not hitting specific ships, nobody wants business with these suicide drones. So I'm just not going to hang out in the area.
That's exactly right. And I talked to a professor earlier today at UMass Amherst who studies the supply chain, has been following this really closely, has been consulting with some of these shipping companies. One of the biggest costs they're facing is the increase in insurance because of the increased risk. It just costs them more the second they send a boat onto the waters.
So now as a final question, what's the end game in this, or does this end?
The Houthis claim that this is an act of backing Gaza. They're doing this to hurt the allies of Israel as the Israel-Hamas war wages on. But I spoke with Thomas Juneau at the University of Ottawa earlier today. He's studied the Houthis for a long time, and he predicts that that would not bring an end to it. He says that, in fact, the Israel-Hamas war was a pretext for these attacks in the Red Sea, and that even if there's a ceasefire or something like that, and there's a temporary pause to the attacks, the Houthis, based on everything he's studied, would have no reason to keep that pause going. They will eventually find another excuse to start these attacks again and get the world looking at them. And hopefully, he says, their final goal is to become the internationally recognized government of Yemen. That's what they want in the long run. So it doesn't really matter what happens in Israel.
Right, a temporary problem that's going to be maybe a long-term problem. Zach Hudak, thank you so much, Zach. Really appreciate it. There's been a lot of space rocket activity these days, so we're going to try to keep developments straight. For SpaceX, whose CEO is Elon Musk, the fourth time was the charm. Its Starship rocket, the biggest and most powerful ever successfully completed a test flight after the last 3 attempts ended in explosions. After liftoff from Texas Thursday, it traveled more than 16,000 miles per hour and reached an altitude of 130 miles before splashing down in the Indian Ocean. The entire flight took about an hour. The goal is to make the rocket reusable, and NASA hopes to use the Starship to send astronauts to the moon again. That could happen as early as 2026. Now to the other rocket in the news, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, which is competing with SpaceX to shuttle humans to various space destinations. It successfully docked with the International Space Station Thursday. There was a bit of a delay due to a problem with the capsule's thrusters, which are key for maneuvering. So, like a plane stuck over O'Hare Airport, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams had to circle for an hour, though in this case they were circling Earth. Now that they've docked, they'll spend about a week at the space station. Multiple tornadoes tore through the eastern U.S. Wednesday, killing 1 person and leaving more than a dozen others injured across 3 states. In Michigan, a powerful tornado carrying 95-mile-per-hour winds came in so quickly, officials didn't even have time to sound the warning sirens. A 2-year-old was killed in a Detroit suburb, and his mother was hospitalized after the storm caused a tree to fall on their roof. Ohio and Maryland also saw tornadoes. Meanwhile, we're following storm threats over the eastern seaboard, and here's meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Extreme heat and severe storms really defining the weather across the country from west to east. So let's break it down for you. You can see that we'll have storms through the evening, and some of the storms can be right along I-95, lingering tonight down through North and South Carolina. But most everything overnight tonight should push its way off the eastern seaboard. In the west, it is all about the heat right now. Even places that are notoriously hot are really extreme right now. Excessive heat warnings, including places like Phoenix and Las Vegas, where the temperature could climb to 110 plus in some of these locations. Heat advised to extend up through Nevada and then portions of coastal California as well. Look at some of the numbers that we're going to see tomorrow. On Friday, 103 in Fresno, 104 in Bakersfield. In Vegas will be 109 and 111 for you in the Valley of the Sun. Now down across Florida, watch for a front to sag down south, but it stops, and so that means it's a surge of tropical moisture fueling more storms. More heavy rain in our forecast could lead to some flooding. That could last all the way through next week. And for more in-depth coverage, you can watch the Weather Channel on cable and now live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Mike Bettis, thank you. A question we've asked for decades in America is now being answered in Tokyo. Does the government belong in your bedroom? Last year, birth rates in Japan fell to a record low of roughly 727,000. It's a more than 5% drop from 2022 and the 8th consecutive year of declines. The Japanese prime minister called the drop, quote, the gravest crisis our country faces. When officials in Tokyo learned that 70% of people who want to get married aren't attending events or joining apps to meet a partner, they dedicated nearly $2 million to marriage promotion projects, including a government-run dating app that will launch this summer. To access the app, users must provide photo ID, an income certificate, and legal proof of being single. On top of that, they must interview with app administrators and sign a pledge stating that they are looking for marriage rather than a casual relationship. It's an interesting proposal that the city hopes will lead to a few. Vladimir Putin is warning about a possible retaliation against Western nations ahead. What the Russian president had to say about the U.S. allowing Ukraine to use their weapons against him. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. President Biden spoke in Normandy, France, Thursday to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Biden honored the World War II veterans present at the ceremony. He also drew parallels to the ongoing war in Ukraine, warning of modern-day tyrants. An Israeli strike targeted a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in central Gaza Thursday, killing more than 30 people, according to local health officials. The Israeli military says it had been monitoring the school and found at least 20 militants operating at the site to plan terrorist attacks. The prosecution's star witness in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial took the stand Thursday. Haley Biden, the widow of Hunter's brother, Beau Biden. Haley, who was granted immunity for her testimony, said she panicked when she found and later discarded the gun at the center of the case. The president's son faces 3 counts related to lying about drug use when purchasing a gun and possessing the gun while using narcotics. Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a warning of possible retaliation to Western nations this week. His comments came after several countries, including the U.S., Germany, and Poland, gave Ukraine permission to use their weapons to hit targets inside Russia. Putin called it a dangerous step while questioning why Moscow wouldn't do the same and supply weapons to nations intent on striking targets in Western allied countries. Retired 4-star Polish general and former Polish Army Chief of Staff, General Raymond Andrzejczuk, joins me now from Washington. General, thank you so much for being with us.
Big pleasure.
How do you read that warning from Vladimir Putin? And given the warning, was it the right move for Poland and other countries to let Ukraine use their weapons to strike inside Russia?
You know, I'm Polish, so I exactly understand the Russian language. It's not about, the words they use, but about the narratives. They're absolutely unacceptable and still the same. I think right now it's time to change narratives, to change the language we sending to the Russia for more credible, for stronger voice, and to send a message that we are not accepting what he's doing.
And when you think about sending that message to Putin, is there something you think would send a stronger message that should be done?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And not only sending message, but it's about our activity. So he invaded a sovereign country, which is absolutely far away from our civilizational standards and also multinational rules. And all we should do is to let Ukraine win. You cannot win sitting at home and drawing the red lines and self-deter yourself. So I think we should send a message that there will be no limitations. Ukraine has a chance to engage targets in the territory of Russia, which goes to the victory. Full stop.
May I ask you a question on this anniversary of D-Day, which Poland took a role in that D-Day, those D-Day operations, but also obviously Poland was the first nation invaded by Hitler. How do you help Americans understand the Polish mindset about what's happening in Ukraine and what Vladimir Putin is doing?
That's very important for Poland. I served in the first Panzer Division, was with one of the units that was landing in the Normandy. So piece of my heart is still in this anniversary. And also Monte Cassino anniversary a few days ago, many other places. So Poland is strong enough today And we don't want to repeat the story. The Polish soldiers are fighting for their freedom in the different countries, and then it takes 5 years to go back to the Poland. So Ukraine is in this position, and we have to help them to just to win.
What do you think Russia has learned since the invasion started? Because there was early difficulty. Russia was having difficulty with the fight, and then they seem to have improved. What do you think they have learned, and what is the state, as you understand it, of the skill of the Russian army?
Russian army is in an adaptation phase right now. So the first phase, which was very much conventional and not successful, so they changed the tactics from the operation. They use the land forces, aviation, and also electronic warfare, proxy, and anything. And so now they improve, they change the tactics. This is a matter of speed of adaptation. I mean, the speed of adaptation of Russia, and also speed of adaptation of eastern flank, NATO, and all those Western countries. So what I see, many things was absolutely far away from imagination since the war started. In the beginning, far away from imagination was sending tanks to Ukraine. We did it. Far away from imagination was sending HIMARSs, Patriots, or F-16. So we crossed many lines. I think the new NATO summit coming in Warsaw pretty soon is also time to think what is unthinkable and what should be thinkable today.
And does that mean...
yeah, Ukraine and NATO.
Does that mean sending NATO troops or NATO member nation troops into Ukraine?
Who knows? But first we should build a deterrence, effective deterrence, and consider much more effective ways of supporting Ukraine in the operational domain. I mean, the long-range fires, as well as exactly what we saw over the Iraq when the Iranian drones were coming to the Israel. So it looks like it's possible. So maybe we should consider a different approach to behaving against Russia.
Retired four-star Polish General Raymond Andrzejczuk, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now to a digest of some other foreign news. The election in Mexico that ended this past weekend was the bloodiest in the nation's history. According to local news organizations, 63 political figures, including 37 candidates, were assassinated in the year leading up to the June election. According to a recent report, political violence reached an all-time high under outgoing President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. At least 500 human rights defenders, politicians, and journalists were killed during his 6-year term. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog group, voted Wednesday to censure Iran for failing to cooperate with the agency. This is a largely symbolic political denouncement. It came after the IAEA reported that Iran has increased its stockpile of uranium to near weapons-grade levels. Tehran quickly condemned the censure vote, calling it, quote, an attempt to politically abuse international mechanisms against independent countries. And in England, a woman who weaponized a milkshake is being charged with assault for throwing the beverage at the newly selected leader of the UK's right-wing Reform Party, Nigel Farage. The incident happened while Farage, a leader of the Brexit movement, was campaigning Tuesday for the general election, which is taking place in July. His surprise comeback to politics has shaken up the election, appearing to take support away from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is already struggling with the Conservative Party. According to our partners at the BBC, the shake appeared to be banana-flavored. One sign that countries are coming out of the post-pandemic economic funk will be when central banks lower the interest rates that they raised to tame inflation. That's starting. The European Central Bank lowered its interest rate by a quarter point Thursday, its first rate cut since 2019. It follows Canada's move on Wednesday to reduce its interest rates to 4.75% from 5%, the country's first cut in 4 years. There was once talk of the U.S. Fed cutting rates, but inflation has not shrunk as expected, making that less likely. The story of D-Day, told by those who were there. Coming up, I'll speak with author Garrett Graff about his new book, Capturing an Oral History of June 6th, 1944. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory.
That was Supreme Allied Commander and future President General Dwight Eisenhower in a recorded message to the Allied forces as they prepared to cross the English Channel and invade Nazi-occupied France. D-Day is a military term. It's meant to denote the start of any significant operation, and none in history, or recent memory anyway, has been as significant as June 6, 1944. Army Air Force Tech Sergeant Charles Richardson and his crew flew combat missions just as the first boats made it to Normandy. He retells his story as if it were yesterday.
I was very excited that day. Everyone was keyed up, waiting for this very moment. The memories I have coming in just minutes before the first men arrived on the beach. We bombed the heights with two 1,000-pound bombs. If you can imagine with me being in an airplane and releasing that much weight at one time, it sent the airplane skyward. I had a front row seat as we went back over the target area and could see the men coming in. Many of them didn't wait for the front of the boat to open up so they could get out. They jumped over the sides and started as fast as they could. As many of them made it, died there on the beach. As I watched, I cried because I could not help those boys as they were going ashore. Only happened in just a few minutes. It's been with me for a lifetime.
Well, the story of June 6, 1944 has been and will be retold many times. My next guest has taken those firsthand accounts and compiled them in an extensive and illuminating book. It's called When the Sea Came Alive, an oral history of D-Day, and it's available now. Author Garrett Graff joins me now. Garrett, thanks for being with me. So when you started out with this book, what did you intend to do? And then as you compiled it, did that change?
Yeah, this book arrives at this 80th anniversary at a moment that I think we're all wrestling with this final passing of the greatest generation, the generation that won World War II and saved Western freedom and democracy. And my goal with this book was, we have at this moment effectively every first-person account and memory of D-Day that we will ever have. And so my hope was to gather those voices and tell the story of D-Day in the first person, in the voices of those who participated. And this book brings together about 700 of those voices from all across the conflict, all different sides, Allied troops, British, French civilians, and as well as German defenders. And I think what was so interesting to me, and you know about writing history as well, every book surprises you as a writer. And when you start to write a book on D-Day, you're like, okay, so the book begins, noon on June 5th, maybe? And then you realize that really the success of D-Day took place in the planning in the weeks, months, and years ahead of D-Day itself. And so really about the first third of this book is the planning. It's the story of Roosevelt and Churchill and Ike and Monty and all of those big names of history coming together to plan this second front and deliver the Allied troops in this incredibly audacious moment to the shores of continental Europe.
And Garrett, it was an extraordinary act of sacrifice for those men who hit the beaches. What did you learn about the idea that was in their heads? In other words, not the planners, but the people who had to go hit the sand and hope to God they'd make it.
Yeah. What I love about oral history, what I think the unique power of it is that it puts you back in the footsteps of the participants, knowing only the things that they knew at that moment. I think when you write narrative history, and I've certainly written plenty of narrative history myself, there's a tendency to make events seem neater, cleaner, simpler, more linear, more predetermined than they felt to anyone at the time. And so, we view D-Day as this historic, courageous triumph. Well, when you read the letters of the soldiers on the landing craft, the ships crossing the English Channel on the night of June 5th, that they're writing home to their families, when you hear the stories of the paratroopers in the planes crossing the channel into the dark Normandy sky on the night of June 5th, they're not feeling particularly courageous. They're not feeling particularly brave. They're lonely. They're scared. They're wondering if their training will hold up, whether they have what it will take to perform in combat, and whether they will let down their friends and comrades that next day. And of course, the big question for all of them that night, whether they will live to see the end of the next day. And for 4,000 Allied soldiers, of course, they didn't.
And how did this event, we heard a little bit of it in the piece leading up to our conversation, stay then with those who went through this extraordinary day for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, the veteran that you spoke to there, it sounds like a very sort of typical memory in many ways. I mean, you listen to these oral histories taken decades after the fact, and they can remember the smallest details. The way that the water felt when they plunged into the English Channel, the smell of the apple blossoms as they landed in the Normandy fields as paratroopers. To them, this was a sensual, all five senses 3D experience in a way that they never forgot. And this was, of course, a generation that was pretty reticent to talk about their war experience. Mm-hmm. And so in many ways, the oral histories and memories that we have are minor miracles onto themselves, that we're going to be able to tell future generations what it was like to live this day and this battle. An invasion launched, unlike almost every other invasion in human history, not to conquer or to seize, but to liberate. The men who fought that day, the reason that this sticks with us, the mythology of D-Day, is that the men fought that day for one of the most noble causes humans have ever fought for.
Excellently put. Once again, the book is When the Sea Came Alive. Garrett Graff, congratulations and thank you. The opportunity to own one of the most infamous signs from the 90s is coming soon. Ahead, we'll tell you when some of Virginia Beach's popular no cursing signs are set to hit the auction block. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
On 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
June 6, 1968, Senator Robert F. Kennedy died at the age of 42. He was shot the night before at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, where he was celebrating his victory in California's Democratic primary. Here is how CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite, in a special report, characterized Kennedy's final stretch campaigning in that tumultuous, transformative year.
These last few weeks, Robert Francis Kennedy was enjoying himself. There was a good fight to fight, and he was a fighter. Ideals were at stake, and he was an idealist. And for a man whose demeanor always seemed to suggest a boyish kind of shyness, he really enjoyed getting out among the people.
The man who put an end to that good fight with a series of bullets was 24-year-old Sirhan, a Jerusalem-born Palestinian who had emigrated to the United States from Jordan. Investigators later located a handwritten manifesto by Sirhan detailing how Kennedy must be killed for, among other reasons, his support for Israel. And in subsequent interviews, Sirhan affirmed that he assassinated Kennedy because he felt betrayed by the senator's support for Israel. Now 80, Sirhan was most recently denied parole in 2023. Virginia Beach's infamous no cursing signs from the 90s are set to be auctioned off later this year. The proceeds will be donated to a local police charity that will help fund several initiatives, including aid for families of injured officers. The signs were first put up in the 90s to encourage a more family-friendly environment, but were never really effective. But even though the signs are down, it is still a misdemeanor to publicly curse in Virginia Beach and is punishable with a $250 fine. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. President Biden pays tribute to veterans on the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy and shares a D-Day message to Ukrainians as he linked World War II to the current conflict in Europe. Plus, attacks from the Yemen-backed Houthi rebels are disrupting global trade in the Red Sea. So what does that mean for the average person? We will explain. And the Biden administration's new asylum rules are facing criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. We'll check in with voices in Texas now that the policy is in effect. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?